Maybe while we're waiting, if you could just raise your hand if everything's good, if you can hear me, and you can find the button that says raise hand, that would be great. Tanis, Bonnie, that's great, thanks. Darlene, I haven't seen your wave yet, but that doesn't mean that things aren't good. Okay, well, in respect your time, because, okay, great, Darlene, that's good. So in respect to your time, you guys were here on time, we're going to get started, okay? And as I mentioned before, now that I know that you guys can raise your hands, I also know that you can see the Q&A box. If you've got any questions as we go, please let me know. All right, I'm also going to record this, but again, that's, I can't hear you and no one else will be able to hear you. So it's just if you want to do a replay or share with someone later, then you can do that. So welcome. This is my first webinar like this, so I apologize if there's any technical glitches or anything like that, but everything looks good so far. Thanks to Mom for helping me work out some technical glitches an hour or so ago before we got started. So I chose chocolate as my first webinar topic because it's near and dear to my heart, and I can talk about it for hours and not get bored of it. So I thought I would that would be a good place to start. So, all right. So I'm going to go over a number of different things, but I want to first start with different types of chocolates. So when you think of chocolate, when you hear chocolate, what is it you think about? Is it your favorite chocolate bar or the medicinal bean that it originated from? One of the things that I've always found interesting is that in the US, they're called candy bars. Tanis, you'll have to let me know what they're referred to in Australia as. And typically the things that we think of as chocolate bars are I think the US has it right. They are more candy than they are chocolate. But lots of different varieties. Cacao is a raw chocolate. Unsweetened cocoa powder, similar, but there's some differences that I'm going to go over. There's unsweetened chocolate that sometimes you get as baking chocolate. Bittersweet chocolate, semi-sweet chocolate, sweet baking chocolate. There's white chocolate. There's all sorts of different types. And so what I would want to do is just go over these and let you know what I know about those things and that sort of thing. So what I'd like to do right now is ask you guys what your favorites are. So I've got a poll up on the screen. If you want to just take a few seconds there to choose which of your favorite type, just select them there. That would be great. Okay. All right, so I'll show you the results there on that. Okay, good. All right, so first of all, I had mentioned about, I had said cacao as well as cocoa powder, and so the difference between them. And it's funny because I was looking on Wikipedia and things, and there really isn't a significant difference between cacao and cocoa. They're really the same thing. Cacao is the Spanish word for cocoa, but it's recently cacao has been used to say that it's more of a raw process, and that's how people are referring to it right now. But they're the beans, and so on this slide you'll see that there's the cocoa powder, which we're familiar with, but in the top right-hand corner, that's a picture of what a pod actually looks like. I've never seen one. I would like to someday, but I've never seen an actual pod. Grow on a tree, and they're full of seeds, and they're in this this milky sort of substance, and they're dried and fermented and then dried, and then typically they'd be roasted, and then the roasted beans would then be crushed and whatnot. But what's being marketed as cacao powder now is raw, so it's missing that roasting process, and we'll talk about a little bit different, why that's good or bad. So you may have seen cocoa nibs or heard of cocoa nibs. They're really just the little bits of the bean crushed up. Cocoa paste or chocolate liqueur, they're really the same thing, and that's when the cocoa bean is just, it's ground, and it comes out to a paste. When that paste is pressed, they press out all of the oil, and what's left over is cocoa powder, and the oil that they press out is cocoa butter. So the chocolate liqueur, the cocoa paste is the combination of the two, and when they're separated out, you've got cocoa butter and cocoa powder. Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong button there. Now, what I'm going to suggest is that if you're going to cook with cocoa powder, or make a drink or whatever, that using a raw cacao is much better for you, much healthier than cocoa powder, because cocoa powder is typically processed at a high temperature, and it uses, the Dutch processing uses alkaloids. And what that does is it reduces the acidity of the bean so it tastes better, but it also destroys a lot of the flavonoids. So a lot of the good healthy features are destroyed in the roasting process, and then the process that, the alkalizing process. So if you are eating chocolate for its health benefits, then going with a raw cacao or a cocoa that's not processed with alkalis is going to give you the best health options. All right, next one, we're going to talk about the difference between milk and dark. So based on the poll, more of you like the milk to the dark, and I preferred milk when I was younger, and I've since changed and now prefer dark myself. This was really interesting researching this, because so there's rules in different countries as to what the levels of chocolate are, and the contents. And so in Canada, milk chocolate has to have a minimum of 15% cocoa butter and 2.5% cocoa powder, a minimum of 25% by weight of the two combined. So anything less than that, and it can't be called milk chocolate. So anything less than 25% cocoa mass by weight, it has to be referred to as chocolatey. So anytime you see like chocolatey coating or chocolatey candy or something like that, there's not enough cocoa mass in it to legally be called chocolate. Sweet chocolate, sometimes referred to as semi-sweet. 18% is the minimum for cocoa butter and 12% for the cocoa powder, a total of 31. I know those numbers don't add up, but it's 31 is the minimum cocoa solids for a sweet. For dark, and this really surprised me, for a dark chocolate, we often think of dark chocolate as 60%, 70%. But in Canada, the legal requirements for dark chocolate are only 35% cocoa solids. So when you think about it, only 35% of what's in that product that you're buying is actually from the cocoa bean. The other 65% can be other things, usually sugar. And then white chocolate. So white chocolate doesn't have any of the cocoa powder at all. It's just made up of cocoa butter and sugar and things like that. But in order to be called white chocolate, it has to have a minimum of 20% cocoa butter. So much of the health benefits are in the cocoa powder, that part of the bean. That's where you get the antioxidants and the flavonols and all of the enzymes, all of the good things for you. That's not to say that the butter doesn't have healthful properties as well. It's a really, really healthy form of fat for you to be eating. But if you're looking for a lot of the health benefits of chocolate, the higher the level of the cocoa mass, or the darker the chocolate, the more health benefits you're going to get from that chocolate. All right, so what are some of those benefits? So when you're out and you're looking and you want to have a nice healthy treat, then what you should be looking for are varieties of bars or forms of chocolate that are at least 70% cocoa mass Now this can be a combination of the cocoa butter and cocoa powder, or as I said before, chocolate liquor in it, cocoa paste, they're the same thing. Any combination of those together that makes up 70%. So that means the other 30% typically is sugar. Sometimes there are other things that are added to it, but usually it's sugar makes up the rest because the cocoa powder itself is actually quite bitter. So another thing to look for, so the percentage on the label is great, but also be reading the ingredients. If sugar is the first ingredient, then there is no way that it can be a more than 50% cocoa powder. It's just not possible. The other thing to look for is the cocoa powder itself is has a lot of fiber in it. So the darker a bar or a product is, the darker the chocolate is, the more fiber there's going to be. So if you can actually find a bar that you enjoy, because that's all part of it, where there is just as much fiber as there is sugar, that's what you're going for, because then you're going to get the most health benefits out of this. And then look for additives. So a lot of better bars, all you're going to find in them are cocoa butter, cocoa powder, sugar, and there could be some vanilla. Sometimes vanilla is used. A lot of chocolate you'll find in it has lecithin, and that's an emulsifier. An emulsifier allows water and fat to coexist together nicely. And a lot of it comes from soy. So if you're trying to stay away from soy, then you'd want to look for products that don't have lecithin in them. And then also, I found that if the cocoa has been processed with alkali, which again destroys a lot of the healthful benefits, that needs to be indicated on the label. So more than just reading the front of the label, where it has the typically has the percentage, you want to read the ingredients to see what's in your bar. Organic, fair trade, raw, they're your best bets for your health and for the health of the planet. All right, so I've alluded to the health benefits of chocolate. Again, the more cocoa content, or the darker the chocolate, the better it is. It has a lot of essential nutrients. It's really high in magnesium and zinc, as well as it's got a lot of powerful antioxidants in it. Resveratrol, the one that's in the white wine. Sorry, the red wine, not the white. As well as another one, and I have to look at this one. It's epicatechin. I'm not even sure how to pronounce it. Epicatechin, I believe. So they're antioxidants. They're also anti-inflammatories. There's heart health boosting properties. That chocolate's been shown to lower blood pressure, improve cholesterol, to play a role in preventing strokes, be helpful in diabetes management, which I know seems like a really oxymoron to say that, you know, chocolate can help with diabetes management, but it has been shown to do that. Increased brain function, mood, reducing stress, even boosting athletic performance. So I want to talk about some of those in greater detail. All right, so antioxidants. So it's really going to depend on the bar that you get. But for instance, there's one, my favorite, and I'm just reading it here. And so in 40 grams, which is not a lot, it's a serving, I would say. Let's get 5 grams of fiber. Now, according to the rules in Canada, that says that that's 20% of your fiber for the day, and most people are not getting enough fiber. So to get 5 grams of fiber in a fairly small serving of chocolate is just amazing. Also in this, 25% of your daily iron. Again, that's in 40 grams. That's not a lot. That's slightly over an ounce. Okay. Also, there is about 50% of your daily allowance of manganese, about 40% of your daily allowance of copper, and about 30% of your daily recommended for magnesium. It's also a good source of healthy fats. And then there's others: potassium, phosphorus, zinc, selenium, that sort of thing. But we got to be careful, because also in that 40 grams of chocolate, and this is an 85% bar, so there's not much sugar, there's only 6 grams of sugar, but it's still 250 calories. So it's not the type of thing where, you know, you're going to go and eat an entire bar, because now you're looking at 600 calories for that whole bar. So it's finding the balance, right? It's finding the balance, and just like the red wine. So heart health, antioxidants. Oh, sorry, I am behind here a slide. I'm sorry about that. Okay, let me regroup here. So antioxidants, these are, so we've got substances that are created simply by living, called free radicals. And free radicals are in our bodies, and they can cause quite a bit of damage. So antioxidants, what they do is they bind with the free radicals to basically neutralize them. So there's a test for what's referred to as the oxygen radical absorbance capacity, and it measures antioxidant activity in foods. And so with unprocessed cocoa beans, so again, that would be ones that aren't roasted, so they're not heated, they're raw, and they're not processed with any alkalis. They score very, very high on this test. And one study has shown that they actually have more antioxidant activity than known superfoods like blueberries and acai berries. But remember that the cocoa, if it's processed with alkalis, which is like that, if you see it's Dutch processed, that's what it's talking about, it doesn't have those benefits. Okay, so just something to keep in mind with that. Okay, now we'll talk about heart health. So there are a number of studies that have been done. One was in Sweden. More than 30,000 women ate 1 to 2 servings of dark chocolate each week, which is very low, I think. So I eat more than that. Each week for 9 years, their heart risk failure decreased by 1/3. Another study, in Germany, they found that eating a square of dark chocolate each day reduced the risk of heart attack and stroke by 39%. Another study in the Netherlands showed that consuming cocoa reduces the risk of cardiovascular disease by 50% over a 15-year period. And then a study in the States concluded that eating chocolate more than 5 times a week reduces the risk of cardiovascular disease by 57%. The unfortunate thing with things like this is that when studies like that are quoted and they say eating chocolate, the problem is they don't specify what type of chocolate, because, and I'm sorry to tell you this, milk chocolate eaters, that you wouldn't get the same kind of protective qualities from eating the milk chocolate as you would the dark chocolate. And in some cases, depending on the sugar content, could actually have more negatives than positives. So why that's important is, heart disease is the #1 killer worldwide. So anything that we can do, anything at all that we can do to help support our heart health, and if you can do it by eating chocolate, I mean, why not, right? So it does sound a little bit good to be true, but again, the studies that have shown people eating the dark chocolate, it actually does have some heart protection. It also has been shown to increase your HDL cholesterol, which is the good one, and lower the LDL cholesterol in the bloodstream. And it can also lower blood pressure. What it does is consuming the chocolate actually helps to strengthen your blood vessels. So in essence, what that's doing is it's going to lower your blood pressure. It improves blood flow not only to your heart, but also to your brain. So stroke protection, I mentioned that it can also help with protecting against stroke. There was a Canadian study done. Individuals eating chocolate regularly were 22% less likely to suffer from a stroke versus those that didn't. And for those that had already had a stroke, but consumed chocolate on a regular basis, they had a 46% less chance of their stroke being fatal. Again, this has to do with the blood vessels. And so when with regular chocolate consumption, it helps with the health of your blood vessels. So blood flow is flowing to and from your heart easier and also to your brain. Okay. Diabetes. So this is the one that's a little odd, right? Because you think, all right, well, diabetics, they need to be looking at, they shouldn't be eating any candy or treats or things like that. So how does chocolate fit in with that? Again, dark chocolate and not milk chocolate. That's not what we're talking about here, because sugar can be really, really detrimental if you've got diabetes. So how does dark chocolate work? Well, what dark chocolate does when you eat it is it increases what's called nitric oxide. And so nitric oxide is one of those things that's really good in our bodies, and it can actually help to improve insulin sensitivity. Okay, so our insulin works better. Our bodies, it works better with our bodies, so that when insulin is released, that it's doing the job that it's supposed to. And it's also been found to decrease our fasting insulin, so how much insulin is actually rolling around in your blood when you don't have any food in your system, as well as glucose levels. I was reading about one study that actually diabetics with eating moderate levels of dark chocolate could actually control their insulin and their blood sugar better than with exercise. And one of the things that you hear about with diabetics is with exercise, you can use it to monitor or to regulate diabetes. So again, really cool, but you want to keep in mind that we're talking about a good quality dark chocolate to get the health benefits. You gotta balance that out with the sugar. All right, chocolate sunscreen. So not really. I mean, not going to be, although I think people did use cocoa butter as prior to the whole, sunscreen and SPS factors and that sort of thing. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about rubbing it on your skin. What I'm talking about here is the flavanols, the phytonutrients that are found in cocoa can actually help to protect your skin. Now, that's not to say that just because you eat chocolate means you're not going to get a sunburn. I mean, I've eaten chocolate for most of my life, and I still sunburn. So that's, a lot of it has to do with your skin pigment and all sorts of other things. But like with any food that is high in flavanols and other phytonutrients, all of those things can help to protect you from the damage that the sun can do. Okay. So again, I'm not talking here about it being your main skin protection, but it definitely does help. Okay. Brain power can actually benefit your intelligence. Yep. It can make you smarter. So you guys know me, and that's, I'm just telling you, I've been eating chocolate for my life. So, again, the flavanols, the antioxidants, it helps to improve the blood flow. It improves the health of your blood vessels. And so now, again, what that means is that you're getting more blood flow to the brain, and that's just known to contribute to performance and alertness. Studies have been done. It's not necessarily age specific, but the studies that have been done with elderly people to measure how chocolate affects their cognitive abilities. And the flavanols in the chocolate actually work to improve brain power, verbal fluency, and several other factors such as dementia and Alzheimer's. all about eating healthy food. And I'm here to tell you that there's healthy chocolate. All right. Stay calm and eat chocolate. So stress. We all have stress in one way or another. Some of us deal with it in different ways, but everybody's got it. So, and chocolate can help to reduce the stress. What happens is it can actually significantly reduce the release of cortisol. So cortisol is your stress hormone. And so the cortisol does a lot of different things. It's that hormone that's released that puts us into the fight or flight, that says, okay, we got to run, or we've got to fight, we've got to protect ourselves. That's what happens when we're in stress. Excuse me. And the components in chocolate can actually help to reduce the release of that. So actually help to keep you calmer. And now, that's not to say that that's typically why we crave chocolate when we're in a stressful situation. And that could be all kinds of different things. That could be just, how we've, grown up to cope with stress. But that's not to say that chocolate doesn't play a role in helping to reduce cortisol. All right, chocolate diet. Wouldn't that be nice? No, actually, I mean, I love chocolate, and I don't think that I could just live on chocolate. But I know that for me, that when I'm getting a craving for something, and a couple of little squares of chocolate will take away the cravings, which is then helpful for not sitting down and eating that entire bag of cookies or bag of chips, that kind of thing. So it's one of those things that when you are craving something sweet, or you're craving a treat, that it's a healthy option to have and can actually reduce your cravings for less healthy options. So it could help you to stick to a diet. And again, as I mentioned, if you go the higher the cocoa content, if you're getting just as much fiber as you are sugar in it, that's actually a really good thing. The more fiber that we've got, the more it makes us feel full. Same thing with the good fats that are in the chocolate. Help you feel satiated. Again, reducing the cravings. Okay. So eating like an athlete, this was not something that I knew about prior, but I had mentioned before about the nitric oxide. And so one of the flavanols, the one that I had trouble pronouncing, epicatechin, still having troubles with that one. And so what that flavanol does, it's in the dark chocolate, and the unprocessed dark chocolate, increases your production of nitric oxide in your body. And so nitric oxide, for athletes, a study was actually done in London, and it was cyclists who were consuming a dark chocolate rich in this flavanol, and found that they were using less oxygen when they were cycling at a moderate pace compared to those who ate white chocolate instead. Of course, the white chocolate doesn't have the flavanols in it. So suggesting that the dark chocolate is actually beneficial for endurance athletes to help them boost performance, because they don't use as much oxygen, so they actually get better performance. So I thought that was quite interesting. Just another one of the reasons to eat more chocolate. All right, some additional benefits can help with skin detoxification. If you're anemic, the high levels of iron are helpful. Can actually be used as a cough relief. PMS cramp alleviation. I thought this was great because I know that my daughter, who doesn't like chocolate, which I still don't understand, she has terrible PMS cramps, and I don't. So there you go. There's some anecdotal evidence that it works to alleviate cramps. Improving vision, remedy for digestive distress. It's just got all kinds of different health benefits to it. So All right. Risks and precautions. So just like anything, too much of a good thing can still be harmful, right? Too much of anything. So with chocolate, it's the same kind of thing. Again, you're not going to sit down and eat an entire 100-gram bar every day. There would be, I mean, there are definitely health benefits, but there's a lot of calories there. And regardless, if you eat too many calories, that's not good for your waistline. And chocolate on its own, cocoa butter, not so much, but the cocoa itself is very bitter. And so if you've ever tried just straight cocoa on its own, or there are a couple of 100% cocoa bars that I've seen, they're actually quite bitter and not very tasty. And so that's typically why sugar is added, is to make them more palatable. And so you got to be careful of that. Again, reading the ingredients, reading the nutrition facts on any products that you buy, to take a look at where is sugar on the list of ingredients and how much is in there. One thing that I found too is interesting is that chocolate can't be called chocolate if it has artificial sweeteners in it. So that's part of the labeling in Canada. And I believe in the, I'm not sure about the US, but in Europe as well, that if there's any vegetable oil in it, so if the cocoa butter is replaced with vegetable oil, or there's any artificial sweeteners, that it can't actually be called chocolate, can't be referred to as chocolate. So just things to keep in mind. And like anything else, when you're eating, it's best to be mindful when you're eating. And what I mean by that is, for anybody who sat down with a bag of chips and then you realize all of a sudden that the bag is empty and you don't know where it went. I mean, you know where it went, but you don't remember eating all of those, then that's a case of not being mindful. And so when you find yourself in a situation like that, whether it be with, snack foods or coffee or wine or chocolate, then that's something that you need to look at. You want to be mindful of it and realize that when you're eating that very healthful 40 grams of chocolate, that you're really enjoying every little bite of it. And then that will actually improve the health benefits as well when you get your mind on board. So, all right. Okay, and so now it's time for chocolate. So I went through that a little faster than I expected. Nervousness, I guess, whatever. If you've got any questions, please let me know. There was a couple of other polls that I forgot to do. Yeah, so this was, so chocolate is something that is very important to me. And I know that sounds maybe it sounds a little funny, but I'm a pretty bit of a chocolate snob, if you will. I find that there's certain ones that I like, certain ones that I don't. One of the things that I've also found is that, especially for people who don't necessarily like dark chocolate, I like mine warm. When we were in Mexico, was it 2 years ago now? I found that the temperature there was absolutely perfect. That when we left the chocolate out of the refrigerator, that it was just perfect. When I take a bite and my teeth just kind of sink into it, wraps around my teeth, that's the perfect temperature for me. And I find with the dark chocolate, it when it's a little warmer, it pulls out the flavor and it makes it a little creamier. Because there's mouthfeel to it as well. So if you find that you're a milk chocolate fan and you're not crazy about dark chocolate, try a couple of different brands. They're all made in different ways. They all have a different ratio of cocoa butter to cocoa powder, which change the mouthfeel, which change the bitterness. the flavor profile to it, try a few of those different things. So Tanis asked, what percentage when you're choosing a dark chocolate bar would you suggest? So Tanis, if you're a milk chocolate eater, then you might want to start out a little slower. 70 is usually a good starting spot. Maybe not a starting spot, but 70 or more, and you're looking at, now you're getting health benefits. So like, that's where you're shifting from it being an indulgent snack that's not really good for you to something that's actually to be considered a health food. So 70 is your is kind of your golden number there. I like an 85. I find that, and it wasn't always that way. Like I said, I was a milk chocolate fan when I was a kid, and I didn't like dark chocolate at all. And I found that now, if I eat milk chocolate, it's like 40 grams of it. I don't think I could eat 40 grams of it. It would be way too sweet, and yeah, I couldn't handle it. And so now even 70, I can, because I eat 85 most of the time. And even if I go to a 70, sometimes when I have more sweet cravings, then I'll go to a 70 because there's more sugar in it and than the 85. But yeah, so that's what I would suggest. Again, not just looking at the front of the label, which has the percentage on it, but actually looking at the ingredients itself. If sugar is the first ingredient, then there's no way it can be any more than 50% cocoa solids. So, and the other things that you're looking for is the things that make up the percentage are, they'll either be listed as unsweetened chocolate or cocoa paste, chocolate liquor, cocoa butter, or non-fat cocoa solids. Those things are the actual chocolate themselves. The other ingredients that make up the other percentage are your sugar, lecithin, flavorings like vanilla. Lots of times you find vanilla. There could be salt in there. Salt actually helps to bring out the flavors of the chocolate, but they're all tend to be in fairly small percentages. So I hope that answers your question. Any other questions? All right. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate it, and it was really good to get my feet wet with this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send out a recording of this webinar. I'll send you a link to it because it's going to be too big to send as an attachment. So I'll likely save it on YouTube and send you a link. And if you liked it and you think that there will be, if there's other people in your life that would benefit or enjoy it, then please feel free to share. You also all know how to get a hold of me, so if you have any other questions later, then please let me know. Oh, do I want to do those other polls before we leave? So sure, we'll do the other polls. I should have done them, at different times, but they'll still be fun. So let's see, what's my next poll? Okay, so I want to know, how much chocolate do you eat? So how often do you eat chocolate? And then I'll tell you what mine is after you've all voted. Okay. So here we go. Here are the results. If I had voted, then it's, sometimes it's once a day, sometimes it's more than once a day, depending on what I'm doing and where I'm at. So there you go. A few times a month just wouldn't cut it for me. All right, let's see. What else have I got here? The other polls. Quality of chocolate. So when you are purchasing your chocolate, do you read the ingredients and do you select your chocolate according to what's in the ingredients? All right, so we're split on that one. Yeah, I find that I can tell a whole lot by a bar just by reading the label now. But that's me. Like I said, a bit of a chocolate connoisseur. So, all right, and then our last one is, oops, not that one, is I'd like to know why you eat chocolate. Oh, and on this one, I believe you can check more than one. All right, so we're all over the place. For me, it's all of the above. Okay. Now, Bonnie asked for some suggestions for using raw cacao in cooking. And this is good because there's not a lot of options when you're purchasing chocolate or chocolate treats or chocolate, desserts, brownies, puddings, that kind of thing that has actually the health benefits of raw cacao. So probably my very favorite is taking an avocado, a nice ripe avocado, mashing it up. Now you can use the food processor, but that it takes a longer time, and then you got the cleaning up of the food processor. I just mash it up with a fork. I add in cocoa powder. Now, how much you add in depends totally on your taste. Okay, so you can make it really chocolatey or less chocolatey, totally by the amount of cocoa powder that you put in. And then you won't have to, but I would suggest that you then add some sweetener as well. So you could add some honey, which will blend in really nicely, maple syrup if you like that flavor, coconut sugar if you want, although it'll be a little gritty, excuse me, and you mix it up and you've got a beautiful pudding that is now full of the healthy antioxidants from the chocolate, from the cocoa powder, and fiber. You've got fiber as well from the avocado. You've got the healthy fat from the avocado. And if you use honey, then you've got the benefits of honey as well. And honey has a lot of beautiful enzymes in it that's helpful. So now you've got yourself a nice dessert treat any time of day that's actually really healthy. And it's also the type of thing that you can serve to people that really don't care about their health because it's just so tasty and so creamy. And I've given this to lots of people and they have no idea that there's avocado in it because they wouldn't eat avocado anyway. Yeah, raw cacao, you can, I make brownies, right? I put it in my brownie recipe that uses sweet potato as well. I'll mix it in with coconut milk and chia seeds to make a different kind of pudding. It doesn't quite have the same consistency as the avocado, but if you're not an avocado fan, then taking a full-fat coconut milk and adding cocoa powder and chia seeds, and in this case you would need less sweetener because the coconut milk has a sweet taste to it, and some vanilla. It's amazing how, for me, adding a little bit of really good high quality vanilla will reduce the bitterness of the cocoa and then reduce the amount of sweetener that you need. Making things like those chocolate haystacks, that coconut and oats and that sort of thing, you can use the raw cacao with that instead of melting chocolate chips. You could use raw cacao, mix in either some cocoa butter or coconut oil for good healthy fats, and then anything else you like. You could put nuts and seeds, coconut, oats, that kind of thing, and just make up little refrigerator cookies basically with those. I haven't actually made a mole sauce, which is a Mexican sauce that's actually a cocoa-based, not sweet at all for meat. I probably had some in Mexico when I went, but It's not something that I've ever made on my own, but that would be a place to try. I think that's one thing that we're going to try very soon with the raw cacao. Making a warm drink with it as well, right? Adding it to some warm milk of your choice, whether it's cow's milk or almond milk or soy milk, whatever, and making your own hot drink. Sometimes what I'll do is take cocoa nibs, which again are the chopped up beans, and I add them to my loose leaf tea, and I make a tea with it. So I'm getting now a chocolate flavor and some of the antioxidants in my tea as a drink. So I have got tons of chocolate recipes. So if you're interested, let me know and I will send them your way. Okay. All right, one last poll for you all is just a little bit of feedback. So I would like to know if there was anything that you learned during this webinar, and did you find it to be a good use of your time? All right. Well, thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate it. And as I said before, if you have any other questions, you want to know anything else, you know how to reach me. Feel free to reach out. And thanks again for coming. Good night, everybody.